Closing the Racial Wealth Gap initiative is extremely important. I'm so happy to see that in recent years there's been a groundswell of activism around the issue of income inequality. But there hasn't really been much focus on the issue of the racial wealth gap, and that's why this particular initiative is so important, which in fact has been around for several years, is that it really allows individuals to understand that income inequality is just one small part of the inequities that we need to pay attention to. Really, when it comes to making sure that families have their own personal safety net that they can rely on in times when income is scarce, that's when they need to rely on wealth. So we're able to rise that issue up to the fore and let people know that there's a lot more work to do when it comes to closing the racial wealth gap. You know, pay inequity is a real problem in America. We do still have discrimination in the workplace as evidenced through differentials in pay. And though we oftentimes hear that term discussed in relation to pay inequity as it relates to gender, the issue is also true when we look at issues of race alone and race intersected with gender. And so yes, we did just experience Equal Pay Day here in America, where the president signed 2 executive orders that were meant to at least expose the information around that as it relates to government contractors and require that government contractors allow their employees to talk about their salaries so as to get it out in the open and therefore lessen the opportunity for discrimination in pay. Equal pay is a problem in the workforce not only as it relates to gender but also as it relates to race. Here in America we celebrate Equal Pay Day, which really accounts for the number of days into the new year that women have to work in order to match the pay of the typical man the previous year. But what we find is that when we break that down by race, we find that black women have to work several months longer than white women to reach their equal pay mark, and Latinas have to work even longer, almost into the next year. And so this issue of equal pay, I think it's important that people understand that the issue is not just one of gender disparities, it's also one that relates to racial disparities as well. The implications is that at the end of the day, individuals have less money that they're bringing home to be able to take care of the needs of their families. The implications mean that there is still just discrimination in the workplace, and it's discrimination that ultimately means that people have not only less income that they can utilize for their own necessities, but also they have less income that they can then utilize to invest in wealth building vehicles. So that means they can't really have the extra money that they need to invest in a retirement account or invest in and even maybe setting money aside to be able to buy a home. And so unless we address this issue of equal pay, we will always have individuals in this country left perpetually behind. It seems to me that the real problem here is that banks targeted certain communities with toxic mortgage products. And we've seen that as a result of lawsuits that many of these institutions have admitted that what they did was illegal. As a result, billions of dollars have been siphoned from communities of color, leaving those communities perpetually behind. There is really so much that needs to be done to really sort of correct this problem, but the issue is that let's not blame the victim. Let's really look at the real perpetrators of the problem, and that is a banking institution that frankly preyed on people in terms of their desire to reach the American dream, but provided them with products that were frankly doomed for failure from the beginning. For those individuals who still have their homes and are underwater in their mortgages, we really need to make sure that people have the opportunity to sort of write down those mortgages so that they're no longer in the situation of being perpetually behind. It's really a wealth draining vehicle if you're stuck in a home paying a mortgage that's higher than what your home is worth. We also need to look at other ways in which we can get people back into the housing market. Unfortunately, so many people lost their homes as a result of the foreclosure crisis, and there really isn't much talk in Washington about what can be done now to make sure individuals still have an ability to obtain the American dream. In fact, the argument right now is one that seems to sort of truncate opportunities to people who want to get back into the housing market. So we need to look at ways in which more people can once again be able to own homes, and I think there are a variety of ways to do it. But first of all, we need to convince Congress that don't just sit on your hands and believe that certain individuals don't deserve to be homeowners. Every American who has a desire to own a home should be given the opportunity to own a home. Well, that report really uncovered a number of different issues as it relates to the Black woman's experience in America. And one of those that I think relates very well to the issue of the racial wealth gap is we looked at the issue of retirement security among Black women. And we found that, quite frankly, there is no such thing almost as retirement security for Black women. Black women tend to be especially insecure. They are the most likely demographic group to be poor in their senior years. In fact, their poverty rate is some 5 times that of white men in America. They are especially likely to be reliant on Social Security as they reach their retirement years. They tend to have very low levels of wealth in their working years even. The typical woman, Black woman, has only $100 in wealth, some previous research has found. So I think this is an issue that sort of perpetuates the problem that Black women find in the workforce. They tend to be underpaid at every level of education, once again facing that double pay gap of both race and gender, and all of that leads to a situation where in their retirement years they tend to be very much left behind.